This is Mario Depeine. Thank you for joining me. I'm glad that you're here to join me. Thank you for taking the time to be with me as I talk about the simplicity and ugliness of racism in America. I've been talking about this topic for a few weeks now, and it's been an exhausting topic, but it's been a great topic because I believe it is something that we need to discuss in America, and we need to discuss it over and over again until it is something of the past, where we are not talking about racism, or we're not talking about the negative effects of it. And so for the past segments, I've talked about just the idea of being thankful. I've been thankful for the white allies that we have had in this fight against racism. And I'm really thankful, and I want to repeat that, I am really thankful for what you have done to help out this fight against racism. Also, I've talked about my experiences with racism as a child, as a college student, and as an adult. I've talked about slave history. I've also talked about how this topic of racism is a topic that people have found to be uncomfortable. Whites especially have found it to be very uncomfortable. And we know why, because it really does challenge the way that whites in America are living and are accepting certain privileges that as they accept those privileges, they are also condoning the mistreatment of blacks in America. I also discussed the idea of classical and operant conditioning. And I talked about how it's such a simple concept. It's the concept of using a pairing of negative ideas with the black skin. So as people have been able to say, okay, black is bad, black is ugly, or whatever, they have paired it together. And that is how classical and operant conditioning has worked, because people have been able to pair it together. And so the last thing I talked about was about African history and the concept of white supremacy. Just how African history is a rich history. It's a history that blacks are very proud of. It's a history that white supremacists have wanted to belittle or take down a few notches, but Africans have made great contributions to civilization and to the whole world. And so today, part 3 is called How White America is Still, excuse me, sorry about that, How White America is Still Profiting Greatly on the Backs of Black Americans. That is the topic today, how white Americans are still profiting greatly from Black Americans. And what I find interesting about this topic is that while many are profiting from Black Americans, they are still treating Americans, Black Americans, as if they are worthless parts of our society, which is so far from the truth. And so as I talk about this, one of the things I keep thinking about is that the reality is, and I've said this before, the reality is blacks and whites, we're all related. We all come from one God. I'm a Christian. I believe that 100%, that we all come from one God. We're all the same family. And God gives wisdom. He gives knowledge. He gives talents to everybody. Everybody has wisdom from God. And I wanted to share a passage that I like. It's a passage, I like a lot of passages, but this is one that really stands out to me. It's in 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 7 in the Bible. And it says, all of us received what we have from someone, but more importantly, from God. I'm sorry, I made a mistake with that. I'm quoting something I wrote. That's not the actual scripture. Here's the actual scripture. But I do want to say that everything that we do have has come from God. Here's what it says in verse 7. For who makes you different from anyone else? What do you have that you did not receive? And if you received it, why do you boast as though you did not? Now, this is the Apostle Paul, and he's saying, you know, what makes you so different than anybody else? You're no big deal. He's saying that what you have, don't behave as if you did not receive it. You received it from something or someone. And in all of our cases, we receive what we have from God. So when I talk about talents that blacks have and whites have, I'm really just talking about the idea that there are things that blacks have been doing as a group culturally and they have had the proprietary rights to them, but they were taken from the blacks as if they did not matter. That's what I'm referring to. So when I'm talking about these things, it is saying that when you have someone who is black and has a talent and has contributed to society, white supremacists have treated them repeatedly as if those were not important. And I think about the song that Bob Marley did. I love Bob Marley as an artist. And Bob Marley did a song called I Shot the Sheriff. And he repeats how I shot the sheriff, but I did not shoot the deputy, right? But one of the things he says in that song is that every time we plant a seed, they say, kill it before it grows. And it's the concept that every time something good is happening, it's being killed or squashed. And that's really the history that has happened with Black Americans in this country. Every time Black Americans did something great, white supremacists, that ideology, the people who condone it, people who have accepted it, people who have looked on and not said anything against it, have let it be where it's like, kill it before it grows. Don't let it grow. Every time blacks would go forward, they said, shut them down. There's so many examples in history in America where banks were burnt down, houses were burnt down, churches were burnt down, businesses were burnt down because the blacks were advancing too far. There's a special one that I just read recently, and that happened in 1898. And that happened in Wilmington, North Carolina, where there were a lot of blacks that were in political office. There were government offices, and the white men especially were getting nervous and feeling threatened at the idea that all these blacks were in power. And they decided that, no, we're not going to have blacks above us. We're going to shut this down. So what they proceeded to do is they started to do a lot of voter suppression, a lot of intimidation. They had armed people with weapons in voting lines to make sure that blacks did not vote again. They also forced the current mayor to resign. They shut down the newspaper that was a black newspaper at the time. They did not only shut it down, but they burnt it down to the ground. And that's the story in Wilmington, North Carolina. It's actually a story that you don't really see in the history books, but it did happen. So those things have happened repeatedly in the United States of America, where blacks would go ahead and really start moving forward, and whites would go shut it down, burn it down, take it apart, make a law, find a loophole to destroy this business so that these blacks do not become equal to us, and God forbid that they should surpass us in any of these areas. And so I find it very funny. I find it ludicrous when a white person would say, why don't you guys do this? Why don't you guys figure out a way to take care of yourself, get independent? Many, many times that has happened where blacks were majority black towns, governed themselves, had the financial backings, had the means of taking care of themselves, and white supremacists, that ideology and everybody else around it who supported it, took it apart. And so that has to stop in America. Don't say move forward, do better, and then as we do better, you say we got to figure out to dismantle, figure out a way to dismantle this progress, or we have to figure out a way to take it over. And the funny thing about this, the concept of Black Lives Matter, so many racist men and women have decided to make it seem like this phrase is a negative phrase. And I guess to a white supremacist, it would be a negative phrase. It is a negative phrase because they don't want to believe that Black Lives Matter. But the reality is they do know Black Lives Matter, because those are the same people, as soon as they see the progress of blacks and they see the impact that blacks have and the success that blacks have, they are the first ones to target those blacks and destroy the works that those blacks have done. And so I am stressing here in this segment that too many times white America has profited from Black Americans and still treat Black Americans as if they are worthless in society. That is a major, major injustice that is happening in America. And the funny thing is, as I have researched this and looked at the statistics of these things, it was overwhelming because there's so much out there that shows that there is systemic racism. There is a system of racism that is continually operating in America that is set up so that blacks do not get too far ahead. And the other thing is, most white Americans are aware of how the system works. I'm going to share a really brief story of a time where one of my sisters had a beautiful tea shop. It's like a tea shop restaurant. It's a place to hang out, cozy little place in Connecticut. And while she was running this tea shop, there was somebody who came in, and she was white, and she wanted to complain about something, and the person said, "Yeah, I'll get you the owner." And so actually, that's not what happened. The person wanted to complain, and when she realized that my sister was the owner, she turned pale in a sense, because for her, it was like, this doesn't add up. How could she possibly be the owner of this place? And that is what happens a lot in America, where you have whites, their ideology, their mindset is saying anything that's good cannot possibly belong to a black person. And if it does belong to a black person, we have to find a way to take it away and make it our own. And so this brings me to my next points. I've studied science a lot, and I've taught science. I'm also a certified science teacher. And I like the idea of two things. There's a symbiotic relationship or parasitic relationship. The parasitic relationship is a relationship where there are two organisms. One organism is the host, and the other one is a parasite. So we have two animals. For example, the dog and the flea. The dog is the host, it carries the flea, and the flea is there to feed off the dog. The dog does not benefit at all from the flea, but the flea is having a feast because he's taking all the nutrients from the dog. So that's a parasitic relationship. The symbiotic relationship is a relationship where both organisms benefit. All right, so they work together. You get some here, I get some here. There's an agreement in the sense where they both benefit. One is not to the detriment of the other. Guess which one the black American is to white America? Yes, you know it. It is a parasitic relationship where in many cases, not all cases, but in many cases, the system of, well, first of all, the system of racism is a parasitic relationship. It says that whatever good that blacks have, we have to take it and make it our own. We have to whitewash it and make it our product. That is a parasitic relationship where blacks, by God's gifts, God has given blacks and whites gifts. But anytime that blacks have received gifts that have moved them forward or are moving them forward, there are many whites with this white supremacist, racist system that say, we have to take it away. We have to whitewash it. We have to make it our own. They cannot, there's still that ideology that they had at the time of slavery, where slaves were not allowed to own anything. And there's still this ideology right now that says, in this system of racial tension, racial disparity, we cannot let blacks own anything good. And so you see it in a lot of different places, and I cannot possibly get into all of them, but I can tell you some of them. I'm going to start with this one. Years ago, corporate America decided this thing. And I think it was a very slick move. And I find it very disturbing because it's a rule that says any invention that is created or that is materialized, that gets inception while you are working with my company belongs to me. So here it is. That's a very slick move. That is a very brilliant move of white supremacy. And that's what I'm calling it, because what that does, it says, we already know that most major corporations are white owned. Now the next move is anything new that is produced by any black mind or any mind is going to belong to the white corporation. To me, that's a parasitic relationship, because those people at the very top who owns these corporations are saying, we're going to own all the patents and everything will always belong to us. It sounds nice. It sounds official, but it still comes down to parasitic relationship. There's something else that I want to share with you. I don't know if you've ever heard of this cell called HeLa cell, H-E-L-A. And the cell is actually a cell, a body cell that has been harvested from a black woman. And I believe it was in the, I'm trying to remember, I believe it was, I don't remember what it is, but I believe it was in the 30s or 40s, but it was a black woman named Henrietta Lacks. And it was not clear that those cells came from her, but there's a journalist who did a lot of research and wrote a book about it. And she did a lot of research and found out that this black woman had, I believe she had ovarian cancer, and the doctors took a sample of her cell. But what they realized about her cell is that her cell would be reproducible and it would not die. In fact, they call it the immortal cell. So Henrietta's cells have been reproduced multiple times. And it has been used for polio vaccines, AIDS vaccines, every type of vaccine that you can think of in the modern era. Her cells have been used. It's become a more than $1 trillion industry. Yet, these people who made the decision to use her cells without her consent have profited from her cell continuously and still profiting, and have not given one dime to her or her family. Now, there's something very wrong with that. And the attitude seems to be because they can do it. They could not possibly say, you know what, we have benefited a whole lot from this. We have made trillions, billions or trillions of dollars from this. We can give this family something. And I'd like you to look it up. It's called HeLa cell, H-E-L-A. Here's the other thing I want to talk about. I watch occasionally NCAA basketball. Yes, I'm going there. And I find it really interesting that these young men and women are playing such tough basketball. And then the superstars of the basketball teams, a lot of them are black. The superstars are struggling. All they are allowed to do is have money for their expenses. I guess to take the bus, to eat wherever they go out, to have clothing, those kind of things. But they're not allowed to make any money from what they're doing. Okay, on the one hand, this sounds okay. But on the other hand, when I find out that the NCAA, for all the different sports that they do, they are a corporation that has taken in revenue of $1.1 billion. Okay, that's $1,100,000,000 in a year they have taken in as revenue. Of that revenue, $821 million has been received as a result of TV and marketing fees. And those revenues are from championship events and investments. So $1 billion revenue stream, and these kids who are playing basketball, playing football, all these different sports are being monitored severely and closely to make sure that they don't get a single dime over the amount of the expenses that they should have. Meanwhile, a lot of these coaches, and I have nothing against the coaches, a lot of these coaches are being paid $1 million and above to coach them. A lot of these universities are building stadiums. They're paying all these salaries, and the little black kids who have this hope of going to the NBA or whatever they want to go to, NFL, no, you don't need to get all that. There needs to be something done. There needs something that needs to be done differently for this, because to me, that is a way of exploiting these young kids. The NCAA must change its ways. That needs to be different. That is exploitation. To get all these money, you're driving new cars, you're buying new houses, you're investing all kinds of money, you're building new stadiums, and you don't tell me you can't figure it out. There should be a way for you to say, okay, since you play and you're making this much money, we're going to you get this money in the bank somehow. I mean, a person, you could have a 5-year-old who's a movie star and can earn millions of dollars, and they put that money in a trust for that 5-year-old because they don't believe that that 5-year-old should work for nothing. So why are the college students being told, you're going to do all this work, we're going to put your image everywhere with your sneakers and the way you have your socks and your jersey, your hairstyle and all this stuff, but you're not getting a dime from it. We're going to profit from everything that you do. And maybe you'll go into the pros afterwards. No, something needs to be done differently for that. I cannot accept that as fair. That is not fair. And so again, it's controlling all that wealth so that it goes to white America. That's what's happening. And so here's the other thing. Mass incarcerations. Do you realize that for a black boy, if you have 3 black boys hanging out on the corner, they need to understand that one of them is likely to go to prison this year. Now, if you have 6 Hispanic boys on the street, 1 out of the 6 will probably go to jail. Is likely to go to jail, prison. Now, if you have 17 white boys on the street, only 1 out of the 17 will go to prison. And they're the biggest majority in the country, only 1 of them. So here's how it is. Statistically, 33% of black young boys will go to jail, while 17% of Hispanic boys will go to jail. And only 5% of white boys will go to jail. And we're talking about the same crimes, same issues, but only 5% will go to jail. Here's the other thing in statistics here. The length of sentences. Blacks get 19% longer sentences for the same crimes that whites commit. 19% longer sentences than for the same crimes that whites commit. I'm saying these things because I'm showing you that there's a lot of incarcerations of black young men, black boys, and what's happening is they're also using them to earn money. They have these prison work programs, and I'm sure some of them are helpful to get them back into society, but a lot of them shouldn't even be in jail in the first place. That's a different issue. There are work programs, but then there are also a majority of these setups where these men are in jail and they're only earning about 40 cents to $1 an hour every day. One of the higher earners, one of the higher payers of that jail system is New Jersey, and there's another state, but New Jersey gives $2 per hour. That's a good thing, I guess. But no matter how you look at it, it's horrible, because this is slavery in the penal system. And here's the other thing. The jail system, the penal system, the prison system in the United States every year generates there's about $282 billion to maintain that system. Now, when you have a $282 billion, I believe it's $260 to $282 billion to operate that system, that means if I'm the one that delivers the food for that company, for the jails, I'm making money. If I'm the one that delivers cigarettes, what they would call commissary goods, I'm making money. If I'm the one that's delivering cleaning supplies, I'm making money. If I need to hire guards, all those guards are going to be paid. Now, here's the interesting things. Every time there's attempts to have prison reform, to change the system, people push back because they don't want to lose that $260 to $282 billion that's being poured into the jail system, because they're making money. Even when there are less inmates, they're still making the same amount of money. So the money is being earned because of these black men that are being put in jail. So what you find is that although blacks represent about 13% of the US population, they are the most high concentration of prisoners in the US system. Over 34% of the prison system is black. And so it goes back to what I said in the first segments of my series, is that white America does not want to let go of its slaves. They want to keep this system going, and we have to stop it. This has to be the year that it stops. This has to be the year that we challenge every corner of this system, because it is a wicked system. It is an unfair system. It is an evil system. It is a selfish system. And so here's the other thing I want to talk about. In 1973, there was a governor called Rockefeller. He was also he came from a very rich family. I think they did a lot of petroleum, a lot of oil companies. Rockefeller was a governor. When he was governor, he decided to be really tough on drugs. That was in 1973. He signed the Rockefeller law. I don't know the exact name, but that was his law. When he signed that law, the law stated that if you are caught possessing 2 ounces of any narcotics, you are guaranteed 15 years in jail, automatic. Not just 15 years. It says 15 years to 25 years to life. There are people who are put in jail for life for about 2 ounces of marijuana or drugs in New York State. And that was not the only states. There are other states who adopted the same program. And lots of blacks put in that jail system, get them to work. Let's get our slavery another way. Let's use the black boys. Let's use the black men. If you are a Christian, if you are a God-fearing person, this should bother you. You should not be able to sleep knowing these facts. And if you are able to sleep, and if you are comfortable with it, you should not call yourself a Christian, because you should have compassion on the people that God would have compassion on. This should not continue. And so what you see is this. Now that a lot of states are legalizing marijuana, some of the toughest opponents of legalizing marijuana are making the most money off the business of legal marijuana. One of them is John Boehner, former Republican Speaker of the House. John Boehner is set to earn $20 million from his company, his marijuana company that he is a big lobbyist for, or marijuana group, I should say, because he and a few partners are selling off their share. He's set to earn $20 million plus. And he was totally against legalizing marijuana. Now, personally, I never smoked and I never tried marijuana. When I was 13, I considered smoking a cigarette that I found in my father's car when he smoked for a year. But I said, don't want to try anything that's likely to control me, and I never touched it. But I'm saying here that, isn't it ironic that the person who was like, we're going to be tough on drug laws, we're not going to legalize this stuff, is now making the most money from the legalization of these drugs. Now, sad thing is, you still have all these black kids, right, languishing in jail. They're still in jail. They should not continue to be in jail. We need to get that rectified. That cannot continue. In fact, let me tell you this. The marijuana business now in 2017 was a $20 billion business, legalized marijuana. It is projected that in 2022, it will be $77 billion business, 4 times that of 2017. Now, what is a big injustice is that the people who wrote the laws about marijuana distribution and production have set up the laws and the licensing in such a way that only the richest of the rich can actually start the business, which cuts out a lot of black people from being a part of a business that many of them were penalized for doing on their own while they were being independent dealers. How is that? How is it that these white individuals, white men, are allowed to say, we're just going to take over the whole thing, we're going to amass all the money, and we're going to keep these blacks out of this business? There's not even a conscience that says, you know what, these guys struggled for years trying to sell this stuff, and we bought it from them too when they were on the street. And in fact, the statistics in America says that whites and blacks use drugs at about the same rate. Yet, more blacks are put in jail as a result of possession. Disparity everywhere. In fact, as I did this research, I was saying to myself, man, this is overwhelming. This is giving me a headache. The more I look into this, so there's plenty of information out there to show how this is a systemic issue. Racism is not just people saying, hey, I don't like black people. It's not just people saying, I am a member of the Ku Klux Klan. It's not just that. It is a solidly built system that continually perpetuates the same ideology from the inception of it. From slavery to now. It's the same system. It's been modified, but the whole system is set up so that it takes from blacks, it stomps down the black person, and whatever they can take out of your hand to make it their own, they will do it. So there's a lot of intellectual appropriation where, as I said to you, with the corporation that's happening, when I think about intellectual appropriation, whenever I remember as a kid, I used to love, I didn't know any better. I used to love watching Elvis Presley singing and dancing. And then as I got older, I realized, oh, you mean a lot of those songs he stole from black people? I can't watch that. His biggest song, Ain't Nothing But a Hound Dog. He got it from Big Mama Thornton. That's her name. She's the one that originally produced that song, performed that song. She's not the writer, but that was a black song. And he's like, oh, he's a king of white rock and roll. In fact, whites didn't want to participate with the black music because it was black music. So they found a white face. Elvis Presley was a white face. Now we can appreciate this music because a white man is singing it. And that happens all over America repeatedly, where it's like, You come up with a good idea and somebody goes, oh, I don't know. And then a white person takes your idea and says, oh, that's the greatest idea. Where did you get that idea? I came up with it myself. No, you did not. That happens repeatedly. The music industry right now, I don't have statistics on that, but I know that there are many, many people who have been great performers, who have wanted to have rights to their music, but they were pushed out. Corporate executives have made it a point to make sure that they do not let these Black musicians or Black artists have wealth that they could build on. So they're still just performers, but they cannot be entrepreneurs because of that, because they lock out these people. That happens all the time. Here's the other thing about statistics in America. Did you know? I didn't know this. I just learned this. A Black person with a BA can earn an average of about $32,780 a year. $32,780 a year. While a non-college white person did not graduate from college can earn an average of $80,692. Did not go to college, did not graduate college, maybe has an associate degree, but can earn $80,692. That's a big disparity. The white non-college graduate is earning more than double the college graduated Black person. That's a shame. America, you should be ashamed. That is a shame. But again, the white supremacy system, the racist system that we have in America that is legally keeping this going is a system that says, we don't want these Black people getting too much money. Here's the funny thing about that. They know that if you make 100,000 or more, you're going to be in their neighborhoods. So there are corporates, there are people that go, we need to keep them at this level, because if we raise up their level, they're going to be our neighbors. And if they're our neighbors, they're going to have their kids going to school with our kids. Can't have that. Cannot have that. But the funny thing is this, and I'm having fun with this because it really doesn't matter when it comes down to God, because God made us all. But since you're using Blacks to identify us and to push us in different corners of your society as if we don't belong, we don't, all of that, I'm just having fun with this as I speak. The funny thing is this, as these things are happening, there's all this attempt, all this fight to keep Blacks from having any generational wealth. Meaning, there's been a big opposition to having Blacks have anything that they can own and pass along to the next generation. While whites are like, party, I just inherited $20,000 from my relative. That's it. No, I inherit $100,000. Really? What else? Oh, I inherited the mansion. Oh, I'm not really caring about that because I already have a ranch. Oh, what did you inherit? Oh, I inherited the Bentley. Oh, wow. That's it. What about the Porsche? Well, that's for so-and-so. There's a lot of that happening. Meanwhile, Blacks have been kept from having these kind of things. As I said before, when they did build the wealth and they did start putting money in the banks, there were many people Blacks who lost money when they had put money in the bank, and somehow the money was lost and it was not insured, and it was purposely taken from them. And so you have this culture now in Black America where, although we are the lowest earners as a group, we are the biggest spenders. I think many of us have realized that as we've done the blackout and we've said buy only from Black people, Black owners, so on. Here's where it's at right now. I was looking up some information on blackinamerica.com is the website. But I was looking up some information, and it says that Black Americans spend $1 trillion $200 billion a year. Let me say it again. Black Americans spend $1,200 billion a year on goods. We are the top consumers in this country, from what I understand from my research. The US economy is a $22 trillion economy. That number I gave you represents 5% of that economy. That is very significant. So while we are enriching America with our monies, our hard-earned monies, America wants to treat us like we do not matter. But we already know we matter. First of all, we matter to God, but we have to live lives that say we do matter. And we're going to do everything possible to take what God has given us and be faithful with it. Now, when you see us being faithful with it and you see us growing our wealth, please do not come and burn it down, because that's the habit that white America has. When you see us building wealth, you want to burn it down. And so there's a culture that has started in America. People laugh at Black Americans and they go, yeah, can you believe it? They don't have a house, but they're buying the fanciest cars. Can you believe it? They're focusing on the new clothes, their new shoes. And you know what? Sometimes I do question that. But then I also understand that Blacks have had such a history of things being taken away from them that I think many of them culturally have started to live in the moment. I'm going to spend my money before the white man takes it away from me. I'm going to have a nice car before they stop me from enjoying my life. Or I'm going to enjoy this stuff before they kill me. Maybe that's what they're saying. But I know I've seen both sides. Historically, I've seen Blacks build wealth, build businesses, build housing, build great neighborhoods that have been torn down, burnt down. But I've also seen Blacks who have decided, I'm not going to put money in the bank because it's going to get stolen. I'm not going to invest because it's going to get lost. So I'm just going to live for the moment. So don't blame us on both sides. Don't laugh at us because we're spending the money that way. Of course, we have to get better at that. But I also understand that as Black wealth grows, some of your white counterparts, your white friends who are white supremacists, are also looking at how are we going to take that down? How are we going to take it away? Historically, that has happened repeatedly in America. And so we have to change this. This has to be different. I find it really funny, and I said this last time about the idea that so many whites have great wealth that was passed down while Blacks did not have anything that they could own. And so one of the things that I read is that to actually catch up at the rate of earning that we have, it would take over 200 years to catch up to the level of wealth that whites currently have, unless something dramatically different happens. See, at the rate that this is going, where Black people with a BA are earning about $32,000 and whites without a BA are earning $80,000, at that rate, it would take over 200 years to even start catching up. I don't think that would happen unless something drastically changes. And the reality is a lot of whites are flaunting what they have as if they did it all by themselves. All the major wealth in America was built on the backs of Black people. There is a lot of wealth in America because it was extracted and born out of the pain and suffering and labor of Blacks. So don't walk around like, hey, look what I got. How come you don't have it? Maybe because you guys are being racist and white supremacists and you believe that you should be first and you believe that you should be on top. and you believe that you should have all the wealth. Maybe that's why. And maybe because we're saying we're not going to be violent and we're not going to be this way and that way, and that's why it's okay this way. Maybe that's it. But there has to be changes, because as I reported, as I discussed earlier about that song with Bob Marley, the idea of kill it before it grows. Kill it before it grows has been the ideology of white supremacy in America, has been the ideology of whites who also, there are whites who, if I talk to them, they might go, you know what, I have nothing against black people, you know, I don't mind them living next to me or whatever. But those people are not speaking up against that. So as I said before, if you're not speaking up against it, you're just as guilty. You're just as guilty because you are benefiting from all of that. You are benefiting when that policeman decides that he's going to terrorize a black person to make sure that they don't come in your neighborhood. You are benefiting. There's so much disparity. We can't even make this sound nice. There's been a hostility that has been used against blacks for centuries. As a Christian, God, I know, sees it. And at some point, God is going to change it. And I'm hoping that this is the year that God's going to change it. Because when you think about it, this system has seeped into everything that we know. In our schools, in the multiracial churches, our clubs, recreational facilities. When I say our, I'm saying everything that's in the U.S. I know some of you say, no, those are our clubs. Those are our schools. I know you're saying that, but I'm saying everywhere that whites and blacks are together, the whites, a lot of the whites are thinking whites have to be on top. White churches, mixed churches, whites have to be on top. Blacks have to be at the bottom. And here's something that you probably will realize is that sometimes you see a black on top and you go, something doesn't look right. Then the white goes on top, you go, oh, no, that's right. That works. That works. That's not just you saying, I don't think it's right. That's the way you've been indoctrinated. That's the way you've been trained. That's what you believe. That's how you grew up. And you have to stop and say to yourself, I have to undo this. And you might feel a little discomfort, but it surely is not as much discomfort as what blacks are experiencing every day in America. And so here's the thing I want to say. When you look at all the mistreatment in America of blacks, and you look at all the deliberate attempts to keep blacks from moving ahead, and you look at the way many black achievements have been squashed, have been ignored, have been minimized, and despite that, many blacks have moved ahead still. As I think it was Maya Angelou, her poem, Still I Rise. Despite that, blacks have risen and continue to rise. But when you look at all the mistreatment, you should not wonder, we should not wonder why blacks in America are the leading sufferers of high blood pressure, heart disease, diabetes, and a host of many other what I would call hereditary diseases. They're not really, I would not call them necessarily hereditary disease. I would call them more so, you inherited a black skin, you're going to inherit all the mistreatment as well. You're going to inherit the daily stress of being told that you don't belong, you don't count, you don't matter, or you're lazy, you're not productive, you're just trying to take from us. You just want to mess up our neighborhoods or whatever. All that constant mistreatment causes daily pressure, daily stress, causes disease and trauma. That is the reality of it. So while you live your happy days life, like in that sitcom in the 50s, we are constantly trying to figure out how to make it through the day. Because I know personally, anytime I step out my house, I say to myself, if the police stops me, what am I going to do? If I blow the horn at somebody who's white and they decide to get upset at me, they might decide to call the police and say, hey, he did this and did that to me, because that's how it works in America. And I could be in my house, the police can come break down my door and say, hey, we heard whatever, whatever. And I go, what are you doing? And then they say, relax, slow down, whatever. So I'm saying to you, the reality in America is that it is understandable why blacks suffer from these diseases, because a lot of these diseases have to do with a lot of pressure, a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, a lot of discomfort on a daily, continual basis. And who is going to help change that? I know God for sure is going to get it to change. And the thing I want to say is that everything in America is saying we are not equal. But everything in God's word says we are equal. And we are the same. And you're no better than us. And see, I want to read one passage as I close out. It's in Luke chapter 14, verses 10 and 11. It says, but when you are invited, this is Jesus talking, when you are invited, take the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he will say to you, friend, move up to a better place. Then you will be honored in the presence of all the other guests. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. See, Jesus is saying, when you're invited to a special gathering, don't try to take the best seat. Because if you take the best seat and it wasn't reserved for you, you're going to be humiliated. And they're going to say, excuse me, can you not sit there? We have somebody more important coming than you. And then you'll be humiliated in front of your friends. So he says the second part, he says, but when you're invited, take the lowest seat. So that when your host comes, he'll say, hey, come up here. This seat is for you. It's reserved for you. And then you will be exalted. You will be lifted up. See, with this wicked system in America, whites have been exalting themselves over and over and over and over again. You have been taking the best seat in the house everywhere you go. Everywhere you go, you've been taking the best seat. And God says that you have been exalting yourself. And he says you will be humbled. That is gospel. Good news, truth. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled. And so God will exalt the black person. He will exalt those who are being oppressed. He will lift them up. He will lift us up in his time. That is the truth. And if you have a Bible, you should go to Luke 14, verse 10 and 11. Have you been practicing how to humble yourself? Have you been practicing how to go to a black person and say, hey, you know what? You take the best seat. I've been sitting on the best seat for a long time. You take it. They go, what? Are you serious? Yes, you take the best seat. You sure you're not going to call the police if I take the best seat? I'm not going to call the police. Take the best seat. Why don't you practice that as a white person? Because if you don't, there will come a time where God will humble you. Because he says to all of us, if you exalt yourself, you will be humbled. But if you humble yourself, you will be exalted. That's the truth. And so thank you for your time with me. Thank you that we could spend time together and really discuss this. And I'm glad that I could have a chance to discuss it with you. And I hope you share it with other people. I hope you join me again next Thursday. I will be doing this again next Thursday, God willing. Next Thursday, my topic is going to simply be change must come now. That's next Thursday's topic. Change must come now. I don't want to build up to this step, this level anymore. We must have change now. Thank you again. Have a good night.